While I was successful, I was able to set this up on another component to act as an anvil to support this, and then tap gently round the periphery there to rivet that thing and firmly in place. I've straightened it up slightly on the case, and I've put a drop of super glue down in there which will help hold this all together, because the casting's actually cracked at that point. But now I've got to clean up my other diaphragm components here and reassemble the aperture, the diaphragm. So assembling the diaphragm. Here I've got the retainer plate. I'm making sure I've got it the right way up. There are two spots here where it's held in place in the case with screws, and I can see the mark from the screw head there and there. So I know that face goes that way up. I've also taken great note of the position here is where the flash contact comes in, and I've checked that against the case. And I've done that before I have assembled the diaphragm, so that I'm not struggling once I get all the blades in place. It's important to know which way the case is going to go back on once you get to this stage. Now, what have I done here? Well, normally I would assemble this after I've got the diaphragm in the case. So basically, normally this moving plate here I would assemble on top of the blades, then put the case in place, then go back and put my aperture control ring in place at that point. This time I'm doing it back to front. I'm leaving my aperture control ring and that on the case. They've been cleaned and put back, and I'm going to lower the whole case complete with that on top of the blades. I'm interested to see if it works out, whether it offers me any advantages compared with doing it the way I normally do it, or any disadvantages, because if it doesn't work well, I certainly won't do it again. But it's an alternative possibility. It's getting these diaphragms assembled is awkward on a good day. If there's a possible shortcut or a possible method that makes life slightly easier, that's worth a go. So I'll put these blades in place on the mechanism, on the retainer plate. Now these blades are not symmetrical. At one end the rivet is closer to the centre line of the blade. At the other end this rivet is closer to the edge of the blade. The rivet that's closer to the centre line goes to the retainer plate here. These blades are just put into place. They're laid in place, working round this plate in an anti-clockwise direction, one blade on top of the next. These blades are not particularly flat. That makes them awkward. It makes them awkward to get the blades, get the pivots in position without disturbing another blade. I've got all my blades lined up in a row here so that they're all facing the same direction, so as I pick them up it's easy for me to get them into position. As I get to this point, I've got to pull the first blades back outwards so that to expose the hole in the retainer plate. And the blades are very light, easily disturbed, and it is by no means unusual to have to do this process 2 or even more times before you get a good result. It's very easy to accidentally bump things and have all the blades go flying and have to start again. Here's blade number 10. Now I have to lift the first few blades over the top of the last few blades. That is not going well. I can tell I've got a blade out of position because this one, the spacing's wrong. I'm pulling that slightly round from where it was, because the closer it is to where it should be, the easier it's going to be for me to fight the thing into place, because it won't go easily. I can be assured of that. So here I've got my case. I've got the aperture set round to the maximum position. And I've got to try and pick up the pins on the blades and the slots in that ring. Now I know my case goes on here. You know, I should be greeted, I should hear that click into place almost. That was it, I think. I think that was it falling into place. Tip this back up the other way. Pop it on my stand so I can see what I'm doing. Now that plate's held in with 2 screws. I can see that the pivots are mostly in place on the retainer plate. 1 or 2 of them look like they've been displaced. I'm just going to start these 2 screws. That's all I need to do. And have a look at this. Now, there's a blade here, the pin's not in position. But the other pivots are all in place. I'm going to see if I can pull that blade into position. I can just see that the head of it, that pivot, is not quite in position. Yeah, it's just dropped into position. I'll tighten those 2 screws up a bit and check the action of that lever. That's smooth. All of the blades are connected, so they're obviously in their slots or in their holes at the appropriate ends of the blades. That's good. Well, that's a useful result. That went fairly smoothly for me, and I'm judging the feel of this now. It's by no means loose, but I know the blades are clean, and so the tightness I feel there is not from oil on the blades sticking them together. It's simply down to friction of the adjusting ring or of the slotted ring inside that moves those blades about. And I judge that to be a good result actually. I'm not going to muck with that at all. I'm quite happy with that. So before this case is ready to go on, I've got to put my detent spring back in here, the detent for the XN lever. This is always a bit entertaining to get in. Swing it around so you can see it. It sits in here like that, and it's very keen to take off. It's almost in. Oh, it's going. That's sitting down in position now. That's correct. Now I'm not going to be disturbing that until I put the case back over the mechanism plate, because I don't want that spring taking off to the hills, which is what they're, well, as all springs are, they're always keen, but they're always going for the boundary, so I'd like not to give that the opportunity. Pop that case to one side. I've got my mechanism plate here, which I've lubricated with a bit of graphite powder, and now I've got to put my blades back in place. Okay, well, I've cocked the shutter, and I've also moved the blade actuating ring out of the clip there into the fully open position, so I can position the blades in the open position. I've got my blades here all ready to go, and I'd marked on my case where the first blade was to go with a single scratch, which was there. That's my first blade position. I'd also marked here with a single scratch, so I know that's the second blade position, and everything else must follow from that. These blades are all identical. There are no obstacles to manoeuvre around. That's the 5 blades in position. Now I need to put my case in place over the mechanism plate. I'm just moving the aperture scale so to expose the screw holes. Oh yeah, there I can see them. And see which way this case goes on. And I do believe that it goes on here. Now the flash contact sticks out the pin of that, so I've got to sort of hook that into position. As I lower that case in place. I've disturbed my blades now. Get that back in position. No, that didn't do it. Just make sure I haven't mucked up my blades here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now that's correct. Why is this not swinging into position easily? I'm going to close my blades up. I'm catching the edge of the blade on the case as I try to get it over the top, and that's causing me grief. I'm trying to put this on in the wrong position, I can tell that, because it doesn't want to go. I've got a lot of screw holes here. I'm choosing the wrong ones to line up, I think. Okay, yeah, I'm only about 90 degrees out of where I'm trying to put things. When you're trying to put things in the wrong place, it's no wonder they won't fit. Let's have a quick look at this. Oh, way over there. I really am out of don't know where I'm going with this. That's better, let's try that. That's it. That was it. All I had to be was in the right position and everything went great. Just pop one of those screws into place. And one over here. Tip the case over, flick that back into position. There you are, shutter blades opening and closing smoothly. That's good. Now, where was the long screw to go? That was to go over here where I've just put a short one. I thought I'd marked that position, but I can't see a mark. I might have marked it in some invisible fashion. That, of course, is the only long screw, so I can confidently put all the screws back in here now. And one last one here. Just checking that the aperture control lever moves smoothly, and it does. Now what's the other lever? Oh yes, the XM lever. That moves smoothly, its detent functions correctly. If we cock the shutter moves smoothly too. Got a stray graphite powder there from having lubricated the mechanism plate. We'll just see the back of that. That looks good. Next thing is to put that detent spring back in here. The detent spring's job is to ensure that the shutter blades stay firmly closed while you are cocking the shutter. And without that, sometimes often the shutter will continue to work completely normally, but occasionally you'll find that as you go to cock the shutter, the blade actuating ring picks up here and follows the cocking action, and you end up with the shutter briefly opening, or completely opening even, instead of staying cocked. That's good, that's nice prompt action there. I've got to get my flash contact stuff back into the body, and then I've got to clean and fit the retard gear train and self-timer or delay action. Now, to get our moving flash contact back in place, to cock the shutter, hold it open on B, now we've got a bit of fluff there. It sits down in a pivot hole just there. Now it's reluctant to go in, it's catching on this thing. Normally that's further back. Let's try this here, see if I can get this in position this way. That's in position, that's fired, that allows that to swing out, and I can get its spring in position. Yes, it's that flash contact being damaged, that's what's caused the problem there. It prevents this lever from moving as freely as it should have done. I'll have to check and see if it functions correctly. This little spring in position, and again, because this lever doesn't swing as freely as it should do, it's hard to get that to go in position. Yeah, I may just have to bend that lever slightly, but we'll see how we go. That's correct. Okay. So I'm just going to adjust that contact slightly. I think that's a little bit off at that end. Try that. That's better. That's swinging normally now, that's ideal. So, this contact, I get that into position. I'm going to cock the shutter so I can get this into position. And there's this tiny rivet on the base of this that locates in a hole in the mechanism plate. And I've got to get that seated because otherwise it won't position correctly. It's always a bit of an act getting that into that tiny, it's very short, the rivet's only very thin, very short, and it's difficult to get that seated correctly. Now, here's our lever. I'm just going to have a close look at this lever once I've got it all in place. It looks like it's bent down. And I'll need to make sure that it's not bent down at the end, because otherwise that would mean that the mechanism may not move smoothly. And I've just disturbed my flash contact now. That's in position. That flash contact here, this one, the one by the pin here that I've just put in, that sits on top of this point here. Must always sit on top of it, not be tucked underneath or anything odd like that. Let's get this in position. Let's check the action of that. Now that's good. I'm looking at the state of this lever, making sure it's not bent down and pushing on the lever below it, but it's not. Now the thread on that screw was quite tight. That's where it goes through into the mechanism plate, but that's all it was. It was just the thread that was tight. It wasn't binding on the lever at all. The lever's quite free there, so that's good. Well, basically that shutter's ready now for the retard gear train to go in, so I better prepare that. To fit the retard gear train, first you must cock the shutter, and the arm of the retard gear train must be pulled in towards the centre, otherwise you can't get this thing sitting down into position. I'm just lining it up with the screw holes and making sure that this end is sitting in position. That looks correct. Two screws. The taller of the two screws goes down here, which is about 2/3 of the way down the retard gear train. I'm just making sure that this tail here is astride the lever, the upright on the blade actuating ring, not pushed off to one side. It should be either side of it. And here we have a single screw. And the shutter should run. There you go. Well, that runs nice and smoothly. That's good. Did you see any of that? Now I just want my the self timer in here now.